The massive dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled under the light of 3 artificial suns. 200 years had passed since humans first joined the 17 advanced species that governed the known universe. Though they were not the most technologically advanced, humans had become essential to the Council's operations in ways few wanted to admit. Ambassador Elena Chen rubbed her tired eyes as she waited for her turn to speak. At 58, she was relatively young for her position, but the weight of responsibility had added lines to her face that made her look much older. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back in a simple bun. She wore the traditional blue and gold Earth uniform that had remained largely unchanged for a century. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Chen of Earth," announced the towering Taurian chairperson, his forearms holding various data screens. His bovine features remained expressionless, as was typical of his logical, emotionless species. Elena stood, her shoulders straight despite her exhaustion. Around her, representatives from 17 alien species waited with varying degrees of attention. Some, like the crystalline Luminari, turned their glittering faces toward her with genuine interest. Others, particularly the silicon-based hegemonic bloc members, barely acknowledged her presence. "Esteemed colleagues," Elena began, her voice clear and strong despite her inner turmoil. "For 2 centuries, humanity has served this council faithfully. We have mediated your conflicts, translated your intentions when literal language failed, and found creative solutions to problems your logical systems could not solve." The Xerillian trade minister clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was a sign of agreement, but the Taurian chairperson's ears flattened against his head. "Yet today I must speak of troubling developments," Elena continued. "The sanctions imposed on Earth's outer colonies last month for what you call disruptive cultural influences are not just unfair. They threaten the very principles this council was founded upon." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The sanctions had cut off vital supply routes to 3 human settlements, all because they had begun broadcasting human music and art to neighboring systems, art that some council species found emotionally destabilizing. "The humans exaggerate as usual," said Sub-Commander Vrax of the Arcturan Empire, his scaled skin flushing blue with dismissal. "Their colonies violated clear cultural exchange protocols." Elena felt her patience, stretched thin after years of similar dismissals, finally snap. This wasn't in her prepared speech, but she couldn't hold back any longer. "Humanity didn't join this council to be merely tolerated," she said, her voice rising with passion. "We joined as equals, bringing different but valuable perspectives to galactic governance. Yet time and again our contributions are minimized, our cultures restricted, and our advice ignored until disaster forces you to heed it." The chamber grew unusually quiet. Even the normally distracted aquilarians floating in their water tanks pressed closer to the glass to listen. Last year, when the drift anomaly threatened the Orion sector, it was human intuition that spotted the pattern your AIs missed. When the trade war between Xerillian and Centauri Prime threatened to turn violent, human mediators worked for months to find common ground. When the Great Library needed a new cataloging system to accommodate 17 different species knowledge structures, it was human archivists who created the flexible system you all now rely on. She paused, looking around the chamber. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably. They knew she spoke the truth. And how are we repaid? With sanctions, with restrictions, with constant reminders of our technological inferiority, while our unique strengths are taken for granted. The Taurian chairperson's hoof-like hand struck the ceremonial gong. "Ambassador Chen, you test the Council's patience with these emotional displays. The sanctions were voted on according to proper procedure." "A procedure that systematically favors the founding species," Elena countered. She had not planned this confrontation, but now that it had begun, she would not back down. She touched a small device on her wrist, and immediately, her assistants around the chamber stood at attention. "For many years, humanity has debated our place in this council. Today, these sanctions have provided our answer." Her voice remained steady, though her heart raced. "As of this moment, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, completely." Shocked exclamations erupted throughout the chamber. Nothing like this had happened in the Council's 1,000-year history. "You cannot. Just withdraw," bellowed the Taurian. "There are procedures, treaties, obligations, all of which include provisions for withdrawal under Article 17 of the Founding Charter," Elena replied calmly. Her legal team had studied this thoroughly. "Provisions written by your own species, chairperson. Around the vast council, chamber, every human representative, nearly 100 people scattered among various committees and departments, stood and began collecting their personal items. The coordinated action, planned in secret for months as a contingency, had a powerful visual effect. "This is unprecedented," stammered archivist Vrektal, a data-focused luminary who had often worked closely with humans. Unlike most council members, genuine concern showed in his crystalline features. "Ambassador Chen, surely we can discuss this further." "We have discussed for decades," Elena replied, softening her tone slightly for Vrektal, one of the few who had consistently valued human input. "Now we act." On the massive central display, reports started flooding in from across council space. Human representatives on thousands of stations and outposts were simultaneously departing their posts. Ships were changing course toward Earth and its colonies. The exodus had begun. "You doom yourselves to isolation," warned Subcommander Vrax. "Humanity cannot survive without council protection and technology." Elena smiled for the first time that day. "Perhaps you should consider whether the council can survive without humanity." With that, she unpinned her council badge, a six-pointed star that represented the 6 founding species, and placed it on the polished table. The symbolic gesture was repeated by every human in the chamber. As Elena led her people from the council chamber, whispers and arguments erupted behind them. Most voices expressed disbelief and dismissal. After all, humans were just one species among many. Surely the cosmic order would continue without them. Captain Tomas Rivera, Elena's chief of security, fell into step beside her as they headed toward the Earth diplomatic shuttle. "It's done then?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded, the weight of 200 years of human galactic history heavy on her shoulders. "It's done. Initiate the quantum barrier protocol once all our people are safely home." "And if they come after us?" Tomas asked. "They won't," Elena replied, glancing back at the magnificent council dome, already shrinking in the distance. "At least, not until it's too late for them to realize what they've lost." Across council space, the most massive migration in human history began, as Earth called its children home. 6 months had passed since humanity's dramatic departure from the Galactic Council. Life in the vast reaches of council space continued, but not as smoothly as the leadership had promised. Archivist Vrektal sat in his crystalline office aboard the massive council archive station. As a luminary, his transparent body glowed with a soft blue light that brightened when he was focused. Today, that glow was intense as he studied the reports coming in from across council territories. "Computer, display trade route efficiency. Statistics for the Xerillian-Aquilarian corridor," he said, his voice like chimes in the wind. The holographic display showed a series of graphs, all trending downward. Trade disputes between the insectoid Xerillian merchant guilds and the water-dwelling Aquilarians had escalated dramatically in recent months. What had once been minor disagreements now involved naval blockades and threats of military action. Vrektal sighed, a sound like crystal vibrating. The previous year, when similar tensions arose, human negotiators had smoothed things over. They had a special talent for understanding cultural nuances that went beyond literal translation of language. Without them, miscommunications multiplied between species. "Computer, compile all incident reports from the past 6 months. Compare to the same period last year." The results made Rektal's glow dim with concern. Efficiency had dropped 32% across all council operations. Diplomatic incidents had risen 178%. Project completion rates were plummeting. "Is there a correlation with human departure?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Correlation coefficient. 0.92, replied the computer. "High statistical significance." Frechthal prepared his findings for presentation to the council's inner circle. Though not a high-ranking official, his position as head archivist gave him certain privileges. He hoped the data would speak for itself. In the Grand Council chamber, much had changed in 6 months. The human seats remained empty, gathering dust. The atmosphere was tense, with representatives from different species clustering together rather than mingling as they once had. The council recognizes archivist Frechthal, announced the Taurian chairperson, still in power despite growing criticism of his leadership. Frechthal's crystalline form caught the light as he moved to the central platform. Esteemed council members, I come before you with concerning data about our operational efficiency since the human withdrawal. The chamber remained quiet as he displayed his findings. As you can see, nearly every metric of council functioning has declined significantly. Trade disputes have increased, communication errors are rising, even our basic infrastructure is showing signs of strain. Correlation is not causation, archivist, interrupted Subcommander Vrax, his scales now a deep purple with irritation. These are temporary adjustments. The humans were not as essential as they believed themselves to be. With respect, Sub-Commander, Frechthal replied, the statistical significance is overwhelming. Consider the Xerillian-Aquilarian trade routes. The Xerillian are being unreasonable, interrupted the Aquilarian representative, her voice bubbling through the translator from her water tank. They refuse to accept our standard water purification protocols. That is because your standard protocols would poison our larvae, clicked the Xerillian trade minister angrily. The chamber erupted into arguments. Frechthal noticed how quickly tempers flared now, how easily misunderstandings escalated. In the past, human diplomats would have stepped in with creative compromises, often using humor to diffuse tension. Order! Bellowed the Taurian chairperson, striking his ceremonial gong repeatedly. This behavior proves nothing except that we have grown too dependent on human mediation. We must adapt and return to the logical procedures that served us before their arrival. As the chaotic session continued, an aide rushed in and whispered something to the chairperson. His bovine features, usually so controlled, showed momentary alarm. This session is adjourned, he announced abruptly. The inner circle will meet immediately in the crisis chamber. The crisis chamber was a smaller, secure room where the leaders of the 6 founding species gathered to address urgent matters. Frechthal, as a senior luminary representative, had the right to attend, but rarely did so. The long-range sensors at the edge of the Epsilon sector have detected anomalous readings, reported the Taurian chairperson. The drift appears to be expanding again. A collective murmur of concern filled the room. The drift was a mysterious, space-time anomaly that had threatened council space for millennia. It consumed everything in its path, planets, stars, even the fabric of space itself. For centuries, a complex early warning system had kept it contained. That's impossible, said the Arcturan representative. The containment grid is fully operational. The grid is functioning, but the early warning system failed to detect the changes until they were critical, explained the Taurian. The human operators who monitored the system were particularly adept at spotting subtle patterns that our AI systems missed. Surely our advanced artificial intelligence can be reprogrammed to compensate, suggested the silicon-based Promethean representative. We are trying, but the humans had an intuitive understanding of the drift's behavior that we have not been able to replicate, admitted the chairperson. We have lost contact with the outpost on Epsilon 9. 10,000 colonists. Silent. The room fell quiet as the implications sank in. We should send an investigation team, suggested Frechthal. Perhaps there is another explanation. A team has already been dispatched, said the chairperson. But we must prepare for the possibility that the drift has consumed Epsilon 9 entirely. As they discussed emergency measures, Frechthal's thoughts turned to the humans. Their departure had been viewed as an inconvenience, perhaps even a political statement that would eventually be resolved. Now he wondered if it might have more serious consequences than anyone had imagined. On Earth, behind the newly erected quantum barriers that shielded the Sol system from outside approach, Ambassador Elena Chen reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Human observation posts outside council space continued to monitor developments, and what they saw concerned her deeply. The drift is expanding again, she told the Earth Governance Council, assembled in the ancient United Nations building in New York. Just as our scientists predicted might happen without human operators monitoring the early warning system. Should we warn them? Asked Councillor Ahmed, a young representative from the African Union. Elena shook her head. They wouldn't listen. Not yet. Their pride is still too strong. And when they do listen? Asked Councillor Takahashi from the Pacific Alliance. Then we'll be ready, Elena replied, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. But they need to understand what they've lost before they can truly value what we offer. In the depths of space, at the edge of the Epsilon sector, the drift continued its slow, inexorable expansion. The first fractures in the Council's perfect order had begun to show, and they were spreading faster than anyone had predicted. The cosmic balance, maintained for centuries through cooperation, was starting to crumble. 2 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal from galactic politics. The Grand Council chamber, once a model of order and procedure, had transformed beyond recognition. "This is outrageous," shouted the representative of the Silicon Mines, his holographic form flickering with anger. "For the 4th time, our proposal has been blocked without proper consideration." The once orderly chamber was divided into hostile factions. The biological species sat on one side, the silicon-based and synthetic life forms on the other. In the past, humans had served as natural bridges between the different types of intelligence, finding common ground where none seemed to exist. "Your proposal threatens biological interests," replied the Taurian chairperson, who looked noticeably aged compared to 2 years earlier. His once pristine uniform was wrinkled, and one of his 4 ceremonial wristbands was missing. "The Council has voted. The matter is closed." "Then so is our participation in this failing institution," announced the Silicon Mind representative. "The Alliance of Silicon Minds hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." The announcement sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Silicon Mines controlled much of the advanced computing infrastructure that Council operations depended on. Their withdrawal would be another devastating blow. As arguments erupted across the chamber, archivist Frekthal slipped away to his private office. Over the past 2 years, he had documented the Council's steady decline with scientific precision. He activated his secure communication channel, one of the few that could still penetrate the quantum barriers surrounding Earth's solar system. "Ambassador Chen," he said when her face appeared on the screen, "the situation has deteriorated further. The Silicon Mines have just withdrawn from the Council." Elena Chen's face showed little surprise. Her hair had more silver now, and new lines had formed around her eyes, but she remained the strong leader who had guided humanity's exodus. "We've been monitoring the situation, Rekthal," she replied. "Our intelligence suggests the Taurians and Arcturans are also preparing for military conflict along their disputed border regions." Frekthal's crystalline body dimmed slightly. "The peace treaties are failing. Without human diplomatic teams to maintain the delicate balances of power, without humans to continually reinterpret and update the language of those treaties, they've become rigid and breakable," Elena finished for him. "How many colony worlds have you lost to the drift now?" 3, Frekthal admitted. "The containment systems keep failing in new and unexpected ways. Our engineers are brilliant in their specialized fields, but they lack the creative improvisation that characterized human technical teams." "And the Council leadership still refuses to acknowledge the connection?" "They can't afford to," Rekthal said quietly. "To admit that one primitive species was essential to galactic stability would undermine the entire hierarchical structure they've built." On Earth, Dr. Marcus Wong studied the latest reports from their network of observers throughout former Council space. As the former head of the Council's Crisis Prevention Department, he had unique insight into the growing disaster. "Ambassador," he said, entering Elena's office in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters in New York, "we've compiled the latest evidence of Council deterioration." Elena looked up from her desk, which was covered with handwritten notes. A human, habit that many council species had found oddly primitive. How bad? Worse than predicted, Marcus replied, setting down his tablet. The Arcturan Empire has mobilized its fleet along the Taurian border. The silicon mines are shutting down computational support for biological species, and the drift has accelerated its expansion. It's now threatening a major population center in the Centauri system. Elena sighed. And the Galactic Library? Any word on the protest there? Marcus's face fell. That's actually why I came in person. We've just received confirmation that the library on Centauri Prime was damaged in a fire during the protests. Elena stood up so quickly, her chair fell backward. What, how bad? Bad. When the Council imposed access restrictions to sensitive materials after several species demanded it, protests broke out. Security forces responded, and in the chaos, a fire started. The human conservators who maintained the ancient artifacts were no longer there to protect them. Elena walked to the window overlooking the Hudson River. For centuries, human archivists had served as the primary caretakers of the Galactic Library, a repository of 50,000 years of knowledge. Their absence had left a void that automated systems couldn't fill. How much was lost? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Early estimates suggest about 30% of the physical artifacts, including the original testament of the Luminari, the complete biological record of extinct species from the Andromeda colonies, and most of the pre-spaceflight artistic works from a dozen civilizations. A single tear slid down Elena's cheek as she watched Earth sunset. This wasn't what we wanted, Marcus. We wanted recognition, respect, not destruction. I know, he said gently. The question is, what do we do now? Back in Council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. On the contested border between the Taurian Confederacy and the Arcturan Empire, 2 patrol ships exchanged fire for the first time in 3 centuries. The ancient enemies had maintained an uneasy peace largely through human-designed treaty systems that were regularly updated to address new technologies and changing circumstances. Without those updates, loopholes had appeared in the agreements, and both sides were exploiting them. They fired first, insisted the Arcturan commander. His scaled skin flushed deep red with anger as he addressed the emergency council session. Your vessel violated the neutral zone, countered the Taurian representative. Archivist Rekthal studied the treaty in question and discovered the problem immediately. The document defined the neutral zone based on stellar positioning that had shifted slightly over the centuries. Without human diplomats who regularly compensated for such natural changes, the very definition of the border had become ambiguous. In normal times, a human mediator would have spotted this issue long before it escalated to violence. They would have proposed a simple amendment, probably using humor to diffuse tensions. Now the incident threatened to trigger a full-scale war between 2 of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. That evening, as Rekthal returned to his quarters, he received an unexpected message. A small group of council officials from various species had been meeting secretly, documenting the escalating crises and their connection to humanity's departure. We need to act before it's too late, said the Xerillian trade minister, her mandibles clicking nervously as they gathered in a secure room. The evidence is overwhelming. The galactic order is unraveling without human participation. The leadership will never admit it, said a Promethean scientist. Their position is built on the myth of their superiority. Then we must go around them, Rekthal suggested. I have maintained contact with Ambassador Chen. She monitors our situation closely. Would humanity even consider returning? Asked an Aquilarian diplomat. After how they were treated. I don't know, Rekthal admitted, but as systems continue to fail and conflicts escalate, we may soon have no choice but to formally ask for their help. As they spoke across the Rio galaxy, the fragile order that had held for 1,000 years continued to crumble. Technological systems failed in cascading patterns. Political alliances fractured, and at the edge of known space the drift expanded, consuming everything in its path. A hungry void that only humanity had truly understood how to contain. The Council, once so proud and powerful, was beginning to realize a terrible truth. They had built their civilization on foundations they didn't fully comprehend, and those foundations were cracking beneath them. 5 years had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic affairs. What had begun as political tension and diplomatic failures had evolved into something far more dangerous. The technological infrastructure binding galactic civilization together was beginning to collapse. On the bustling space station of Arcturus Hub, Chief Engineer Zivtra worked frantically to address yet another life support malfunction. A member of the 6-armed Doraxian species, she could operate multiple control panels simultaneously. But even this advantage wasn't enough to keep pace with the cascading failures. Reroute auxiliary power to level 12 through 16, she ordered her team. We have 10,000 civilians in those residential sections. The system isn't responding, replied her assistant, panic evident in his voice. The central computer keeps rejecting the commands. Override it manually, Zivtra snapped, all 6 of her appendages flying across different emergency controls. I'm trying, but the security protocols are blocking us. It's like the system doesn't recognize its own emergency codes anymore. Zivtra felt a cold dread settle in her core. This was the 3rd major system failure this month, each one worse than the last. The integrated networks that managed everything, from atmosphere regulation to gravity control, were behaving erratically, refusing commands and implementing outdated protocols. Evacuate those levels immediately, she ordered. We can't risk another failure like what happened on New Taurus. Her assistant didn't need to be reminded. 2 weeks earlier, a similar malfunction on New Taurus colony had resulted in complete atmospheric venting. 2,000 lives lost in minutes. As the evacuation alert sounded throughout the station, Zivtra couldn't help but think of the human engineering teams that once maintained these systems. They had possessed an intuitive understanding of the eye, technology that went beyond technical knowledge, an ability to anticipate problems before they occurred and implement unorthodox solutions when standard procedures failed. The emergency doors sealed just in time. Moments later, the life support systems in the evacuated sections shut down completely. In the Council's Central Technology Division on Alpha Centauri, a grim meeting was taking place. Representatives from the remaining Council species huddled around a large holographic display showing the status of galactic infrastructure. Red warning symbols blinked across nearly every sector. It's worse than we feared, announced Director Kelveri of the Promethean Collective, his synthetic body glowing with stress indicators. The integrated systems are failing at an accelerating rate. Our analysis suggests complete technological regression is inevitable within 3 more years if current trends continue. How is this possible? Demanded the Taurian Supreme Leader Dexra, who had replaced the previous chairperson after a political coup the previous year. We built these systems. We maintained them for centuries before humans joined the Council. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, an elderly Xerillian engineer stepped forward, her exoskeleton clicking nervously. That's not entirely accurate, Supreme Leader, she said. The truth is, while we designed the original frameworks, the current versions of our galactic infrastructure are based on adaptive algorithms developed by a human programmer named Aisha Okafor nearly 2 centuries ago. Explain, Dexra ordered, his bovine features darkening with anger. The Okafor algorithms were revolutionary, the engineer continued. They allowed our technology to evolve and self-repair in ways traditional programming couldn't achieve. The systems were designed to learn from experience and adapt to unexpected variables, what Okafor called the chaos factor. And this is failing now because, Dexra prompted, because the algorithms required regular updates from human programmers, the engineer admitted. Humans had a unique ability to anticipate random failures and account for them in the code. Without those updates over the past 5 years, the adaptive capabilities are breaking down. The system can't evolve anymore. The implications sank in slowly. The Council had built their technological miracle on human innovation, while telling themselves they were merely tolerating a primitive species out of charity. Why wasn't I informed of this dependency? Dexra demanded. Director Kelveri's synthetic features remained impassive. The previous administration classified this information. They feared it would undermine council authority if it became known how essential human creativity was to our technological stability. Dexra's massive fist crashed down on the table. Find a solution. Our best minds must be able to replicate what one human woman created. We've been trying for 5 years, the Xerillian engineer replied softly. Without success. On Earth, Dr. Aisha Okafor was now in her 90s. Her once dark skin wrinkled with age, her hands gnarled but still nimble on a keyboard. When Ambassador C. Chen visited her home in Lagos, she found the legendary programmer surrounded by holographic displays showing the deteriorating status of council systems. They're finally understanding, aren't they? Aisha asked, not looking up from her work. That my algorithms weren't just about efficiency. They were about understanding chaos. Elena nodded, taking a seat beside the elder genius. We've received reports of critical failures throughout council space. The Arcturus station lost life support to a third of its habitation rings yesterday. 10,000 evacuated just in time. And the drift? Expanding faster than ever. It's consumed 5 more systems since our last update. Aisha shook her head sadly. I tried to explain to them, years ago. That technology without intuition is just machinery. My algorithms worked because they incorporated human unpredictability, our ability to see patterns in chaos, to anticipate the unexpected. They valued the product but not the source, Elena agreed. Classic council thinking. Aisha gestured to one of her displays showing cascading failures across multiple systems. They can't fix this without us, Elena. Their minds don't work that way. They think linearly, logically. But chaos doesn't follow logic. Would you go back? Elena asked, quietly. If they asked. The old woman was silent for a long moment. I'm too old now, but I've trained others who understand my work. The question is, should we help those who scorned us? That's what the global referendum will decide next month, Elena replied. But I wanted your personal opinion. Aisha turned to face her, eyes still sharp despite her age. My algorithms were designed to sustain life, Elena, to protect and connect. Letting billions suffer because of council pride goes against everything I created. In council space, the crisis had reached a breaking point. On a dozen worlds, technology that had functioned flawlessly for centuries was failing in unpredictable ways. Transportation networks collapsed. Communication systems went dark. Artificial habitats struggled to maintain life-sustaining conditions. In his private chamber's Supreme Leader Dexra reviewed the latest catastrophic reports. His political rise had been built on promises to restore council glory without human interference. Now those promises rang hollow as systems failed faster than they could be repaired. We have no choice, he finally admitted to his inner circle. Contact Archivist Rektal. He still has communication channels with Earth. Hours later, a small, heavily armed council vessel approached the quantum barrier surrounding Earth's solar system. It broadcast a simple message on all frequencies to the people of Earth. We were wrong. We need you. The message, brief and direct, represented the most difficult admission in council history. For a civilization built on the belief in their own superiority, those 6 words cost more in pride than any concession ever made. Behind Earth's protective barrier, the message was received with mixed emotions. 5 years of independence had changed humanity. They had rebuilt their society according to their own values, free from council interference. The question now was whether they would return to help a galactic community that had dismissed them, and whether it was already too late to prevent complete collapse. As council systems continued to fail across thousands of worlds, the fate of trillions hung in the balance, dependent on humanity's response. The council's desperate message, "We were wrong. We need you," sparked intense debate across Earth and its colonies. After 5 years of independence, humanity faced a difficult choice: return to a galactic society that had undervalued them, or let trillions of sentient beings suffer the consequences of council pride. In New York, the global referendum was only 2 days away. Ambassador Elena Chen stood at the podium in the United Nations General Assembly, addressing representatives from every human settlement. "The choice before us is not simple," she said. her voice carrying to every corner of the packed chamber. 5 years ago, we left because the council refused to recognize our value. Now they ask for our help, but only because they have no alternative. The assembly hall was divided. On one side sat the isolationist faction, wearing red bands on their arms. Their leader, General Torres, had argued forcefully that the council deserved its fate. On the other side, the restorationists wore blue bands, led by Dr. Marcus Wong, who believed that abandoning trillions of beings to suffering betrayed humanity's core values. The reports from council space are dire, Elena continued. 23 worlds have lost all technology. The drift has consumed entire star systems. The Arcturus station lost half its population last week when life support failed completely. They brought this on themselves, shouted someone from the isolationist section. Elena raised her hand for quiet. Yes, they did. But does that mean innocent civilians should pay the price? The question before us is not whether the council deserves our help. It's whether we can live with ourselves if we refuse to give it. As the debates continued across Earth, a surprising voice emerged from an unexpected quarter. The generation, born after the withdrawal. These young humans had no personal memory of council politics or the slights their parents had endured. They viewed the situation with fresh eyes. "We understand your anger," said Sophia Williams, a 23-year-old engineer and the daughter of one of Dr. Okafor's students. She addressed the General Assembly with confidence beyond her years. But humanity's greatest strength has always been our capacity for both justice and mercy. The Council needs to learn its lesson, yes, but we don't teach that lesson by letting innocent beings suffer and die. Her words resonated with many who had been undecided. The referendum was scheduled for the following day. On the edge of Earth's solar system, archivist Vrekthal waited anxiously aboard the council vessel. For 5 years, he had documented the collapse of galactic civilization and secretly maintained communication with human contacts. Now everything depended on humanity's decision. "Any response yet?" asked Commander Lox, a Taurian military officer assigned to the diplomatic mission. "Nothing official," Vrekthal replied, his crystalline form dim with worry. "Their global vote happens tomorrow. And if they refuse?" the commander asked. Vrekthal had no answer. The council's projections showed complete technological collapse within months, not years, as they had originally estimated. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. "They won't refuse," Vrekthal said finally. "It's not in their nature to watch suffering they could prevent, yet we gave them reason to hate us," Commander Locke said, surprising Vrekthal with his honesty. "We treated them as inferior while depending on their abilities." "A mistake we must acknowledge if they return," Vrekthal agreed. The referendum results were closer than anyone had predicted. 52% voted to return to council space and help. 48% voted to maintain isolation. The narrow margin reflected humanity's deep ambivalence about their place in galactic society. 3 days later, Ambassador Chen led a diplomatic mission through the quantum barrier. Their ship, the Olive Branch, carried a team of Earth's finest, engineers, programmers, and diplomats. Sophia Williams was among them, bringing her fresh perspective and technical expertise. What they found shocked even the most pessimistic analysts. Entire sectors had fallen into technological dark ages, while others were ruled by warlords controlling access to functioning technology. The drift had consumed 17 worlds, and the council headquarters on Alpha Prime lay half abandoned, its gleaming towers darkened. "It's worse than we thought," Elena said as their ship approached what remained of the council capital. The once magnificent city was partially powered, with only essential systems still functioning. Sophia studied the readings on her console. The Okafor algorithms are completely destabilized. It's like watching a living system die. In the grand council chamber, once the center of galactic governance, a solemn ceremony awaited them. The remaining representatives from a dozen species gathered to formally receive the human delegation. Supreme Leader Dexra, looking haggard and defeated, stood at the center of the chamber. "Ambassador Chen," he began, his deep voice echoing in the half-empty hall. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally acknowledge humanity's essential role in our civilization. We failed to recognize that your unique perspectives form a crucial component of cosmic stability. The admission clearly cost him great effort. The Taurian species valued pride and strength above almost all else. We do not come seeking apologies, Elena replied with dignity. We come because innocent beings need our help. But if humanity is to return to galactic society, it must be as true equals, not as servants or curiosities. What are your terms? Dexra asked. Elena handed him a data tablet containing the conditions humanity had agreed upon. They included equal representation in all council matters, protection for human cultures and practices, and a restructuring of the council itself, to prevent any species from claiming inherent superiority over others. Dexra reviewed the terms carefully. In the past, such demands would have been dismissed immediately. Now, with civilization itself hanging in the balance, he simply nodded his massive head. Agreed, he said. The council accepts these terms without reservation. A historic moment, passed in that simple exchange, perhaps the first time in council history that a change of such magnitude had been accepted without debate or political maneuvering. Necessity had stripped away pretense. Then we will begin immediately, Elena said. She turned to Sophia and the other technical experts who had accompanied her. Start with the critical infrastructure: power, life support, medical systems, priority to civilian population centers. As the human team dispersed to begin their work, Rekthal approached Elena privately. I knew you would come, he said, his crystalline form brightening with hope for the first time in years. Not everyone wanted to, Elena admitted. There's still much healing needed between our peoples. But you're here, Rekthal said simply. And that's the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history. Outside the council chambers, human engineers were already connecting to the failing systems, their unique understanding of the Okafor algorithms allowing them to stabilize technologies that had confounded the brightest council minds. The work would take time, perhaps years, to fully restore what had been lost. But the first step had been taken. Humanity had returned, not as supplicants or servants, but as equals with unique and essential gifts. The galaxy would never be the same. A decade had passed since humanity returned to help rebuild galactic civilization. The galaxy now bore little resemblance to the rigid, hierarchical structure that had once driven them away. In its place stood the Galactic Concordat, a new form of interstellar cooperation based on principles of genuine equality and mutual respect. On the neutral ground of Ceres, largest asteroid in Earth's solar system, representatives from all spacefaring species gathered for the 5th anniversary celebration of the Concordat's founding. The newly constructed Hall of Balance gleamed under the light of 1,000 floating luminaries, its architecture a blend of styles from 12 different worlds. Sophia Williams, now 33, and the head of the Interspecies Technology Integration team stood next to archivist Rekthal, admiring the central monument. Designed by artists from a dozen worlds, it depicted figures of different species intertwined and supporting each other's weight, a physical representation of genuine interdependence. Hard to believe how much has changed, Sophia said, her dark skin complemented by the silver and blue uniform of the Concordat. My mother told me stories about the old council chambers, how cold and formal they were, with species ranked by their supposed advancement. A flawed system, Rekthal agreed, his crystalline form shimmering with reflective light. We mistook technological progress for true advancement, and hierarchy for stability. Around them, the gathering reflected the new reality. Humans mingled freely with Taurians, Xerillians, Luminari, and even the once aloof Silicon minds. There was no special seating, no order of precedence, only equals sharing ideas and celebrating mutual progress. Ambassador Elena Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp and dignified, made her way through the crowd toward a special platform at the center of the hall. Though she walked with a cane now, her presence still commanded respect. Supreme Leader Dexra, who had overseen the council's transition to the Concordat, joined her on the stage along with representatives from other founding species. Esteemed colleagues, friends, and allies, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. A decade ago, our civilization stood at the brink of collapse. Today, we celebrate not just our survival, but the emergence of something stronger and more genuine than what came before. The gathered delegates applauded. Many had witnessed firsthand the near destruction of galactic society and the difficult, early years of reconstruction. The path has not been easy, Elena continued. Some worlds remain lost to the drift. Others struggle with renewed development. But the Concordat has accomplished in 10 years what the old council could not achieve. In 1,000, true cooperation across our differences. Dexra stepped forward, his massive Taurian frame slightly stooped with age. The old council was built on a foundation of assumed superiority. The Concordat stands on what humans taught us to value: diversity of thought, creativity and problem-solving, and the strength that comes from combining our unique perspectives. Across former council space, the evidence of this new approach was everywhere. The human integration teams, specialists in crisis management, cultural translation, and adaptive problem-solving, had become the most valued personnel in the galaxy. They traveled throughout the Concordat's territory, helping rebuild and reconnect fragmented societies. On planets like New Arcturus, where civilization had nearly collapsed, human engineers worked alongside Xerillian builders and luminary planners to create cities that combined the best aspects of all their cultures. The rigid uniformity of council architecture had given way to vibrant diversity, with each settlement reflecting the unique needs and values of its inhabitants. The drift, that mysterious space-time anomaly that had threatened to consume everything, had finally been contained. The new monitoring system combined human intuition with luminary mathematics and silicon mind processing power, a true collaboration that proved more effective than any single approach. But the most profound change was cultural. Species that had once looked down on humanity now sought to understand and emulate the very traits they had dismissed as primitive: creativity, emotional intelligence, adaptability to chaos, and the ability to find meaning in uncertainty. Back at the celebration on Ceres, Sophia and Rekthal made their way to a large control center adjoining the main hall. Today marked not just a political anniversary, but a technological milestone: the activation of the new transgalactic network, designed to connect all Concordat worlds in a way the old council systems never could. "Are we ready?" asked Elena, joining them at the main control panel. Sophia nodded. "All systems check out. Unlike the old network, this one doesn't depend on any single species oversight. It's truly collaborative, adaptive like my grandmother's, algorithms but with built-in contributions from every member species." Dexra observed with interest. In the old days, a Taurian leader would never have participated directly in a technical procedure, considering it beneath their dignity. Now, he watched with genuine curiosity. "The honor should be yours, Ambassador," Sophia said to Elena, stepping aside from the activation controls. Elena shook her head with a smile. "No, this is a moment for the younger generation and for true partnership." She gestured to Sophia and Rekthal. "You represent the future we've built together." Together, the human engineer and the luminary archivist placed their hands on the activation panel. The system recognized both their biometrics, a symbol of the shared authority that defined the Concordat. The network came to life in a dazzling display of light and data. On the massive screens, they could see connections forming between thousands of worlds. Some fully restored, others still rebuilding, but all now part of a cohesive whole. "It works perfectly," Rekthal said, his crystalline form glowing with emotion. "Of course it does," Sophia replied with a smile. "It was built by all of us together." Later that evening, as the celebrations continued, Elena stood at a large observation window overlooking the stars. Dr. Marcus Wong, now retired from active service but still a respected advisor, joined her. "Penny for your thoughts, Ambassador?" he asked. "I was thinking about choices," she replied, watching distant ships moving through the space lanes around Ceres. 10 years ago, we chose to return and help, even after everything that happened. It would have been easier to stay isolated, to let them face the consequences of their pride. Would it? Marcus asked thoughtfully. I'm not so sure. Vengeance has a way of hollowing people out from inside. Elena nodded slowly. There's a human saying I shared with Rekthal years ago. Sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone. The council had to lose us to understand our value. And we had to return to fully understand our place in the cosmos, Marcusy added. From the observation dome, they could see the stars spreading out in all directions, countless worlds that had once looked down on humanity, now bound together with Earth in a new kind of relationship. Some still rebuilding, others flourishing with new cooperation, but all forever changed by humanity's departure and their measured, purposeful return. On the main display, data streamed in showing the successful containment of the drift through coordinated effort. The stars themselves seemed to burn brighter, illuminating a galaxy that had learned at great cost the true meaning of civilization. Not dominance or hierarchy, but genuine partnership across the infinite diversity of life. What do you think? The next century will bring? Marcus asked. Elena smiled, watching young humans and aliens mingling freely, exchanging ideas without the barriers that had once defined their interactions. Something better than anything we could have imagined, because we'll create it together. In that moment, watching her people find their rightful place among the stars, Elena knew that the painful journey had been worth every step. Humanity hadn't just saved galactic civilization, they had transformed it and been transformed in return. The end.